Today, we are going to learn several effective techniques for finding and fixing errors in writing, ranging from basic grammar to the overall meaning of a sentence. We will cover things like subject-verb agreement, verb tenses, and even how to pick the right word forms. To get us started, do you know what the most important first step is when you look at any sentence to see if it is correct?
I'm not really sure. Is it just reading it over to see if it sounds right? Or maybe looking for where the period goes?
Actually, the very first thing you should do is identify the subject. You need to ask yourself who or what the sentence is specifically about. If I say the students study English, can you tell me who the subject is in that sentence?
Oh, okay. In that sentence, I think the subject would be the students, since they are the ones doing the action. So does that mean every sentence has to have a person or a thing at the start for it to be right?
That is a great observation. While the subject is often at the beginning, its main job is to be the person or thing the sentence is about, regardless of its position. Now that we have found the subject, can you tell me if the verb looks right in this sentence? She work every day?
That sounds a little bit off to me. I think it should be she works every day. Like, you have to add an S to the end of the word because it is just one person. But I get confused because usually adding an S makes things plural, so why does the action word get an S when it is only one girl?
That's a tricky part of English grammar. For verbs, adding an S is actually how we show that a single person, like she or he, is doing the action in the present. If the subject were plural, like the students, we would drop the S and just say they work.
Oh, that's really confusing. So for nouns, adding an S means there are more of them, like two cats, but for actions, the S actually means it's just one person doing it? That feels totally backwards. Is that rule the same for every single verb, or does it change if I'm talking about something that happened yesterday?
You hit on a very important point because the rules do change when we talk about the past. Adding that S only happens in the present tense, whereas for the past, we usually change the whole form of the word, like saying she worked yesterday. Since you mentioned things happening yesterday, let's look at this sentence. Yesterday, she goes to school. What feels wrong about the timing there?
Well, if you say yesterday, that already happened, but sounds like it is happening right now, or like something she does all the time. It is like you are mixing up two different times in one sentence. I think you are supposed to say she went to school, but went looks nothing like go, so how am I supposed to know which words change completely, and which ones just get an ed at the end?
You are exactly right that yesterday and goes do not match because they belong to different times. While many verbs just add an ed for the past, others like go change completely to went, and you will get used to these through practice. Since we have covered subjects, agreement, and timing, let's look at the actual form of the words. How would you fix the sentence? She drives careful.
She drives careful? I think it should be she drives carefully. It needs that lie sound at the end. I remember hearing people say it that way, but I don't really know why. Is it because carefully describes how she is driving, while careful is more like a word for the person herself? Like, she is a careful driver?
You hit the nail on the head. Careful is an adjective describing the person, but carefully is an adverb that explains how the action is being done. Before we move on to pronouns, let's do a quick check. If I say the happy children plays outside, can you find the error in that sentence?
Wait, let me think. The subject is the happy children, and since there are a lot of them, that means it is plural. Earlier you said that if the subject is plural, we drop the S from the action word. So it should be the happy children play outside, right? Because they are all doing it together.
Spot on. Since the children are a group, we use play instead of plays. Now that we have covered word forms and agreement, let's look at pronouns, which are words that stand in for nouns. Do you see a problem with the sentence, Maria loves his new bag?
Wait, that sounds really weird. Maria is usually a girl's name, but his is a word you use for a boy. So it's like the sentence is saying the bag belongs to a guy instead of her. It should be Maria loves her new bag. But what happens if we don't know if the person is a boy or a girl? Do we still have to pick one? Or is there a different word for that?
That is a great question, but the material we are following focuses on matching the pronoun specifically to the person mentioned. In this case, since Maria is our subject, her is the correct match. Now let us look at articles like a and an. If I say she bought an umbrella, why does that sound a bit clunky to you?
It sounds clunky because umbrella starts with a vowel sound, like I remember a teacher saying that if a word starts with A, E, I, O, or U, you have to use an instead of a. So it should be an umbrella, But does that rule always work for every word that starts with those letters? I feel like I've heard people say a university, but U is a vowel, right? Why wouldn't that be in university?
That is an insightful observation. We use a next word starts with a vowel sound, and since university starts with a literal y sound, it takes a instead. Next, let's look at prepositions, which are words that show relationships. If someone says, he is interested on science, does that sound correct to you?
No, that sounds wrong. I think you're supposed to say he is interested in science. I hear people use for things like being on a table or on a bus, but with science, it's like he is inside the topic. Prepositions are so hard because they are just these tiny words, but they change all the time. Is there a rule for which one to use with specific words, or do I just have to memorize them one by one?
Prepositions can be tricky because they often depend on the specific word they follow rather than a general rule, so memorizing common pairings like interested in is often the best approach. Now that we have looked at those tiny connecting words, let's look at the bigger picture of how a sentence is built. If a sentence is missing a piece or has extra words that make it confusing, we call that a structure error. Can you tell me if this sentence feels complete and logical? To the store for some milk.
No, that definitely doesn't feel like a whole sentence. It's more like a fragment or just a piece of a thought. It tells me where someone is going and why, but it doesn't actually say who is going there. Like, is it the mom or the cat? You need the person at the start, like we talked about earlier. Is there a specific name for a sentence that is missing the person doing the action?
You are right that the sentence is missing the person, and we call that a sentence fragment because it is just a piece of a thought. Now that we have looked at the structure, the next step is to check if the sentence makes sense in context. For example, if I say, although it was raining, we went outside, the word although helps the sentence flow logically. Before we wrap up with our final tip, can you explain why although works better there than a word like because?
Well, if you said, because it was raining we went outside, it sounds like the rain was the reason you wanted to go out, which is kind of weird. Usually, rain makes people want to stay inside. So using although shows that the rain was a problem, but it didn't stop us. It's like a surprise, right? But wait, if we are talking about making sentences flow, does the word always have to go at the beginning? Could I say we went outside, although it was raining, and still have it mean the same thing?
Exactly. You can definitely flip the sentence around, and it keeps the same meaning. You really have a great grasp on how words like although connect two ideas that seem to go against each other. To finish our lesson, there is one final and very important step to take after you have found and fixed an error. Once you have made your changes, you must read the entire sentence again from start to finish. Why do you think it is so helpful to read the whole thing over one last time instead of just looking at the part you fixed?
I guess it is because when you change one word, it might mess up something else in the sentence that you didn't notice before. It is like if you change a part in a machine, you have to run the whole thing to make sure it still works, right? Plus, I sometimes find that after I fix a grammar rule, the sentence just sounds clunky or weird when I read it out loud, so maybe it helps you check if it actually sounds like a normal person talking. Does reading it out loud actually help more than just reading it in my head?
Reading out loud is a fantastic trick because your ears often catch awkward phrasing that your eyes might skip over. It ensures every part of the sentence now works together perfectly. You have successfully navigated all the techniques for identifying errors. Thanks for such a lively and thoughtful session today.